We thought we knew it all, but once again, we were looking at a very, very complex situation. The rings were broken up into mini rings. There were gaps in there. There were all sorts of dynamical phenomena that we didn't understand. So we very, very hurriedly reprogrammed Voyager 2 to take a much closer look at the rings.
When I began my work in about the 1964, I had suggested that one thing we could do with this particular mission was to fly between the planet and the rings. And very fortunately, we didn't do that, because as we approached Saturn, we saw that the region there that we would have to have flown through with the spacecraft was filled with more rings. There was no question that spacecraft would not have survived trying to go through that gap.
The imaging team could barely cope with all the new detail revealed by Voyager 2. They saw delicate rings that were intertwined, and rings that were held in place by tiny moons called shepherds. There were strange features called spokes, patches of dust particles slightly raised above the rings. These caught the eye of one young graduate student.
I got involved in the study of the spokes, which were these ghostly features that were seen to come and go. And it just came to my head to just kind of categorize the pictures. Into one pile, I put all those images that seemed to have a lot of spokes in them. Into another pile, I put those images that seemed to have virtually no spokes at all. And I made an intermediate category. And of course, each image was tagged with a time. And I basically just did an analysis on the computer of this and found that the spokes actually weren't just sporadic, but in fact they came and they went with a certain period.
Carolyn Porco discovered that the spokes followed Saturn's magnetic field as it rotated with the planet.
I made my very first scientific discovery, and just knowing that I had found something that nobody else on the face of the planet knew at that time was just such an exhilarating experience.
But where did the rings come from? A possible answer came to light when Voyager encountered Saturn's moons, a collection of icy worlds scarred by great impact craters made by meteorites long ago.
The Saturnian system was more like what we had actually expected. Small, cold, icy moons which are heavily cratered set of objects, but there were some real surprises there as well. The innermost of the large satellites is Mimas. We found large impacts. This crater called Herschel is a fourth the size of the object, nearly large enough to have blasted it apart. We find a similar impact crater on Tethys, the next moon out, one roughly a third the size of the object. So it's clear that in their early history they were being blasted by things that were large enough to have torn them apart.
If Mimas nearly got bashed up to bits, then it's very likely there were other satellites that did get smashed up to bits. And the rings of Saturn probably came from a satellite that was close into the planet, got smashed up. The debris or the collisional shards got strewn out into a planetary ring system.
As Voyager encountered the planet itself, it found that Saturn was made of the same gases as Jupiter. These two worlds are the great gas giants of the solar system, dwarfing all the other planets. Yet Saturn held mysteries of its own. Saturn is smaller and colder than Jupiter. It generates less heat within and receives less energy from the sun. Yet Voyager recorded even faster winds on Saturn than on Jupiter, 1,000 miles an hour. Why this should be was not yet understood. And as Voyager left Saturn, there was one final enigma. Saturn's largest moon, Titan, is the only moon in the solar system with a thick atmosphere. Voyager's cameras could not penetrate the orange haze to see what lay beneath.
I found myself alone in the Voyager imaging area late in the evening, about 10 o'clock in the evening, and it was just me and the television monitor. And this was the monitor that had showed us all these tremendous pictures that people were gathered around, and now it was just showing the image of Saturn that Voyager 1 had as it receded from the planet. And I was mesmerized by this whole thing, thinking about how humankind had never seen Saturn from this perspective before, because we had never been on the other side of Saturn before. And I was so moved by me and Saturn alone in this room that I was completely swept away by the whole thing.